Well, I was just sitting here checking on Virgil today, and he was scrolling through some Spectrum posts, and I saw this pop up, and I'm just like, oh shit, it's Renegade time. Alright, so let's take a look at what this guy has to say about the Glaive, alright? The new ship changes for 4.3 look decent, and I'm happy about them. I hope they make further great balance changes, but as always, you forgot the Glaive. Oof. Well, not really, fam. We're gonna get into this. The weapon convergence is not working. Okay, so there's a lot. Just read it. Because, okay, it's missing one power plant as well as the ability to hit anything at all. The weapon convergence is not working because it does not have gimbal mounts when they were introduced. Okay, so you at least know about that. Will the Glaive get some love anytime soon? I would love to fly the ship, but even hitting NPCs is hard when the weapons just shoot straight out of the gun without converging on the pip target. Justice for the Glaive. So, I've been over this a couple of times. Apparently, just no one cares about what I have to say, but I'm going to do it again anyway. So, the Glaive did in fact get some love this last patch, right? So let me pull up this real quick. Go to PvP content creator. I don't know how much further it is up the list, but we're gonna just kind of scroll to find it. Okay. So basically, I'll just throw this over here because. All right, so it did get some changes in the last patch. It wasn't completely and utterly ignored, right? So what did they do to the Glaive this last patch? Well, they changed the rotation values on the ship, okay? So it doesn't have the ability to fully turn on a light fighter. It never will, but it does have the ability to keep up with it a little bit, right? See, the thing is that when you boost on, you know, boosting matches the rotation value of a non-boosted Gladius, and that is enough. It really is to kill light fighters. The Glaive is supposed to be a high skill ceiling ship. Now I know that Virgil and Avenger One and others have their opinion on it, but in my hot take mentality here, they never won a tournament in it, so whatever, they can think what they want. But when it comes to the missing one power plant, you see, here's the thing: um, it doesn't need a second power plant. What it needs is a size 2 power plant, is what it needs. And I really feel that a lot of the things that we're complaining about with the Glaive are going to be addressed when they eventually, whenever the fuck, release the rework for it. Now, we're going to talk about this line right here. The weapon convergence is not working because it does not have gimbal mounts when they were introduced. Well, you see, the thing about the Glaive is that it is, in fact, a monument to CIG sins. And you see, when this ship came out, fixed wing combat was the meta. And back then, it was more like, because you have the ability to apply damage more efficiently with a mouse and keyboard using the gimbal system, right? Um, Fixed weapons did more damage. And when it comes to the reason why you're having trouble hitting things and all this other stuff, is because the flight model in the past, and this is why I argue against the 3.0 flight model and a lot of other stuff, is mainly because this ship was tuned to be at a closer engagement range, right? You see, back then the weapons didn't shoot as far, fall off wasn't as severe, and of course you didn't need to have the convergence because everyone was close enough to each other to to see and hit, right? So over the years, and this is the main reason why the Glaive is underperformed, is because of the fact that its design is fixed wing. You can't change the weapons on any of these Vandal ships, etc., right? The Tier 0 blueprint that is the Glaive does not have the ability to introduce the newer bells and whistles and feature sets that the gold standard ships like the Gladius and even others have. So basically, we gotta wait for the new Glaive before we get those bells and whistles. Now, when it comes to the weapons not hitting, you got to be close, right? You're throwing goddamn basketballs at your opponent, and it's like if they're outside of knife fighting range, you can. It's basically just good fucking luck at that point, right? And I'll throw this up too, just to show you that I do know what the fuck I'm talking about when it comes to the Glaive. Um, it is in fact my ship, not mine. It's my favorite ship, right? So here we're gonna see a fight between one of my students, and essentially he got within knife fighting range of me, right? And as you can see, the pip spread isn't as severe close when you're close to your opponent, and if you time your shots right, you'll be able to hit with the size 5s. But again, because of the convergence and because of the rate of fire, the recharge bug, and then as you're pointing out in this post, the inability for the cannons to converge on target because it doesn't have gimbals, it puts the Glaive in a situation to where it's only useful in certain combat situations, right? It's not ever going to be like this overpowered piece of shit Chris Roberts' baby here, right? The Squadron 42 goddamn hero ship, right? So basically what we're seeing here is a limited use. And back in the thing about the Hornet and what makes it so frustrating for Glaive owners and others their stuff is the Hornet is the Glaive is supposed to be the ship that kills Hornets. Like that is what its job is. It is a Hornet deleter. It is a heavy fighter deleter. But when it comes to light fighters, it's simply going to struggle. If not, you got to rely on the fact that the person you're fighting is either bad or just inexperienced, or the third option, which is what happened to a Blightveil pilot recently in Arena Commander, just flat out didn't respect the size 5 cannon and of course the Elder behind the stick. So we got clapped. And you're gonna see here why weapons need to be rebalanced more than anything else. The Glaive is never gonna be able to compete because of the fact it doesn't have converging weapons. That's just a sad truth. It's a sad reality, and there's no amount of feedback we can give to CIG to fix that, right? Some like one of the devs I have talked to about it, they really don't like talking about the Glaive. They really don't like to address the fundamental design issues with this ship from yesteryear compared to what they're putting out nowadays, right? So, and the thing about the Glaive is that it, as you see here, this is where the main complaint comes in, right? So there's two strategies that can be done against any of these medium fighters, right? If you're good enough, like you're talking about the Shadow Moses cats, or you're talking about, even the Avenger 1 guys, right? These guys are going to positionally fight you. They're going to use the rotation to their advantage, and they're going to sit on top of you and prevent you from being able to out-rotate them. That's essentially the first strategy, the go-to strategy, right? Is denying your opponent the ability to even apply damage. And that's what makes the light fighter so goddamn toxic. And as you can see right now, Zald here doesn't even have to knife fight me, right? He's already discovered after the first 2 rounds that if he stays outside of my cannon range in effectiveness and keeps my pip spread, there's no way of me to effectively apply damage to him. And on top of the fact, with the fall off of the cannons, even if I do manage to hit him at distance, it's not gonna apply the maximum damage. Which is another reason why the Bushido bros love to get in on top of you and do the positional fighting, right? Because they're getting the maximum amount of damage application when they do that, right? This situation, you're getting the least amount of damage applied, but at the same time, you are essentially just preventing this ship from being able to hit you because of its limitations, right? So it comes down to, us having to wait for the rework. Now, Knight Rider in the past on Spectrum has shot me down many times. Not just when it comes to the rework of the Glaive, but even when I mentioned the F7A Mark One, from the Veterans Day sale from 2013, this motherfucker straight crucified me. So I'm taking a massive risk just by even posting anything on Spectrum regarding this fucking ship. You know, it's a problem for marketing. And, this is, I saved this part for last because a lot of you don't seem to agree with this take, and that's fucking fine. But the sad reality is that if the Glaive performs, then they're not going to be able to sell Mark II Hornets. They're not going to be able to sell all this other stuff because, like, everyone's going to want the Glaive because it kills everything, right? So, it's a very precarious topic, and also it's it's a sore spot for me personally, right? Because I know that when the new ship comes in and you have gimbaled size 5 cannons, like that's going to really piss off the light fighter mafia, and it's really going to piss off anyone that enjoys flying a Hornet, because this ship is going to eat you alive. And and when it comes to shooting NPCs and stuff, that's a skill issue, my friend. I'm sorry. There is NPCs and Star Citizen are a non-threat, and they always have been a non-threat, at least to me. It gives you the time to get up on them and shoot them accordingly. Now, like I showed you in this picture here, right? Another thing you got to do is make sure that your ship is set up properly, right? You got to have all power to weapons. If you don't have all power to weapons in the Glaive, you're already dead, right? So that requires it to have a JS300, and also it requires it to have, shields that aren't as good as the Gladius, right? And that's another fucking thing, right? When you're starting to actually start to pay attention to the differences between these Squadron 42 overpowered ships and the ones from yesteryear, right? The Gladius has 2 extra power blocks, and that allows it to have double the amount of shields. Well, not really. Is it really double? So it's about 1,000 to 1,200 more shields on a Gladius. So again, I don't get too bent out of shape about things nowadays when it comes to this, because I know that they're still balancing and tuning things, right? But the Glaive is a special snowflake, and what makes it a special snowflake is the fact that it doesn't have gimbaled weapons, unlike its little brother, the Blade. The Scythe also suffers from the same issues as the Glaive, because again, they're made in an era of the game which doesn't exist anymore, and because of all these automated systems, right, it makes this ship invalid. So when you talk about this topic, right, it makes CIG mad, it makes them a little bit salty, and it also makes the 3.0 crowd extremely pissed off as well, because you're putting in their face the evidence that a lot of ships in the game don't perform because of the 3.0 flight model. The Glaive did not do, you could not fucking do anything with the Glaive in 3.0. It was a dead ship. With master modes, it came back a little bit. With the rotation values they changed, it made it a little bit more viable to use, but it's not there yet. And it's because of the weapon disparity. As long as fucking Gladiuses and everything else can engage you at 1.7 kilometers, which is maximum engagement range for Panthers, you are not going to be able to kill anybody. And then, of course, when they get on top of you the way they do, you can't out-rotate them, and that's it too, right? So because of these 2 underlying problems with master modes, and this is the only bone I'm gonna throw these motherfuckers, right? You know, it shows that you can essentially negate the gameplay of dogfighting by understanding how to prevent somebody from rotating on you, and you can also outrange something like this indefinitely. Indefinitely. And that right there alone, those two reasons right there alone, is the reason why the Glaive underperforms. Even with refactored weapons, right? The Glaive is still going to be vulnerable to light fighters that circle it. And because of the way the speeds are, right? You can't even reset the fight because the Gladius will just stick with you and prevent you from being able to reset and just eat you alive. So having convergence on the guns and having a little bit more additional fall off isn't going to change the fact that this whole punching above its weight class bullshit is in fact bad game design, and it is put the game in a position to either fly a Gladius to dogfight or you fly an Idris, and everything else in the middle is kind of fucking useless, right? At least from a combat perspective, right? Let's not get that blown out of proportion when you're looking at the one trick pony nature of other ships. Then yeah, they have another limited scope and function. But when you're talking about the Glaive, it does not have the weapon recharge to keep up with a Mark II Hornet, and that right there is another reason why it fails to perform at the job that it was meant to do. This is a ship that's designed to kill Hornets and Lightnings. That is what it does. That is what it's supposed to do by lore. That is what it's supposed to do by design. And because of the way the flight model is currently structured and tuned, it cannot do it. Because, again, I can't stress this enough, it was made in an age of the game where fixed weapon combat was the meta. And because most people don't have the ability to play the game at that level, is the reason why we have master modes, and it's the reason why the skill ceiling overall has been lowered down. I don't sit here and like, try to, take away people's skill from the game or their time invested, but when they fail to realize that they're using ships that completely outperform essentially everything else in the game because of its development priority, I get a little tilted at that. All right, it gets a little annoying to me to sit here and say how good you are and how good you can aim when you know that you're essentially tuning your fucking Gladiuses like rifles, and just Tesla fighting people to death, because that's what it is. Like, even at Tesla, you have to put your hand on the wheel occasionally, right? Well, it's kind of the same philosophy here, right? They've automated dogfighting to the point where it makes the Glaive uncompetitive. But because I'm stubborn, I still use it and I still fight with it. If you're not getting, ganged banged by a bunch of salty little boys and gladiuses, then you can get a couple of kills in Arena Command. Absolutely, you can. But the trick is knowing how to fire those cannons, right? And because of the disparity between fixed wing combat and the auto aim system, you either got to be, extremely lucky, catch a pilot off guard, or in my case, which is most of the time, people just flat out disrespecting me and not acknowledging that they're putting themselves right in front of size 5 cannons. And they get clapped. And then they become a laughingstock in their discords about it. Because you shouldn't lose to a Glaive. After everything I just explained, if any of them lose to a Glaive, it is a massive ego check. It is a massive deflation of ego when you kill one of these fucking little shitters and their gladiuses with this fucking ship. Alright? So essentially, we don't want a situation where, a ship overperforms like the Gladius. I don't want that to happen to my baby, right? I don't want, marketing to get hold of the Mark II, overpower it just to fucking make a quick buck. I don't want to see that. But we all know that's what's going to happen, which is why I say the things I say about it, right? You know, it's not personal. It's not, it's just the reality of the situation. It's just what it is. The blueprint in which the Glaive currently is operating under does not have the ability to add the other things that the ship pipeline 2.0 have been able to bring to the table. This is a ship pipeline 1.0 ship. It is literally a string and a fucking, and a cup compared to, the high speed internet connection that is the Gladius. So, it comes down to, a lot of people in the Ace Combat community are not taking into account the disparities between all these other ships in the game and what they're currently flying. Now, CIG is, I can't be too mad at them for that. I understand why it is the way it is, but I don't have to like it. And it's like, if we go the way that Avenger 1 wants to go, then you're gonna have a Glaive with size 5 cannons that can shoot out to 3 or 4 kilometers and have a ridiculously high weapon speed in order to counteract what everyone else can do, right? So, in my opinion, it needs to come down into slower speeds, more manageable dogfights, and not flying around 20 kilometers away from your teammates in prolonged 1v1s. Nav combat is toxic, it's cancerous, and because of what I'm laying on the table right now, I've always believed that the 3.0 flight model was a failure. And it's not just because of reverse tricording and 45ing and, the ESP algorithm and roll dodging and all other stuff. No. The faster things go, the more resources that your CPU and your computer and the more resources that the server have to dedicate into tracking all that movement. So, yes, making the fights closer reduces it, but it also makes it, when it happens, makes it more prevalent, right? So, I know this is kind of a long-winded video, but I haven't seen a Glaive post for a long time, and I just wanted to let you know that that it is right now in its current iteration and its current form. I think the Glaive is in a relatively good spot. But when it comes to dealing with top-end dogfighters and their Gladiuses, the ship doesn't hold a candle. And even with all of the fucking experience and knowledge that I don't have the ability to fight 15 auto-gimbaled fucking weapons on the 5 Gladiuses that are attacking me. Alright? There is no mathematical situation where I win that fight, and there's no decent amount of window of opportunity that allows me to even line up those slow ass size 5s on some of these guys. And when I do, it's funny. So it's a meme ship is what I'm trying to get at right now. And until they release the Mark II variant, it's not going to be able to perform the way that it's designed and the way that it's intended. So, if anything, the Glaive doesn't get talked about by the other end of the community because it literally highlights and shows why they're wrong about master modes, why they're wrong about the previous flight model, and why they're wrong about weapons balancing. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that we should balance the game around the glaive. But what I am saying is that the glaive is the main, outside of the blade and the glaive, the scythe. These are the main bad guy ships of the Vandal, right? And as it sits right now, based on their current performance, it kind of makes you wonder how the Vandal even got as far as they did. So one day, these ships are going to have to be able to directly compete, if not be slightly better than UEE ships, in order to even justify the Vandal being able to invade and take space from humans. All right? And this lore fact alone, has got a lot of these guys worried. They don't want to see this ship come back. You know, I just personally refuse to fly a Gladius. I just personally refuse to engage that type of toxic PvP. And I just don't feel that with the current state of the game and the current state of things, um, that the environment in which you play in is as competitive as some of them would like to believe it is, or imply that it is. And until people can actually, you know, fly their favorite ships instead of being forced to fly the marketing flavored thing of the patch, then it's never going to be as competitive as they like to believe it is. So we're going to give you we're going to add it to the favorites. We're going to give you an upvote. We're going to give you a crab. And we're also going to give you an alien hit. Possibly a thumbs up as well. So there does need to be justice for the glaive. And but at the same time, I don't want to see it overpowered to the point to where it becomes a tool for marketing. Essentially force this into the meta as the best ship in the game. There needs to be factors about the glaive that keep it high skill ceiling. And the more that we add things to it to make it viable with master modes in the current game environment, the less skill is going to be required to use it. So it's going to be interesting to see how CIG goes about balancing this fucking thing. But right now, because of the inability for the cannons to converge properly, the pip spread and the fall off, and then of course not being able to, manage the rotation of light fighters, it's just not in a good spot. But like I said, it's better than what it was.